I arrived on the day Fred Hampton died.
What up, though, man? We back with another episode of Gentleman's History Hour. I'm Rob J10X.
I'm Equality.
We got a special guest, back for a second time, man.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna just call him Scholar Fred, man. How you doing?
Peace.
What's up, brother?
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man.
Great to
thank
be
you.
in August company.
Hey,
Yeah.
most definitely, man. So on a previous episode, we covered the compromise of 1877, and we took a real deep dive on that. You know, EQ as usual, man, had stellar insight and research. And but what we just decided to do on this episode is actually go back to a time leading up to that, who often called the mystic years.
The mystic years that W.E.B. Du Bois mentioned in the Black Reconstruction.
Most definitely. And this was a time of black excellence that really is rarely spoken about and isn't really celebrated. And we accomplished, I learned a lot preparing for this episode. I didn't know that if we go back to Hiram Neville, the first black senator was in 1870. I mean, if you would have asked me when was the first black senator, I would have thought, 1950, and I definitely wouldn't have thought he was from Mississippi. But to set the tone and really bring people in to what was going on, Scholar Fred actually has a letter which was written by the freed soldiers of Georgia. These are black men who had fought for the Union and had real concerns about some things that were about to happen. And you could, kind of bring it in.
Yeah, I researched this data a couple of years ago. And in preparing for this book that I have coming out called The Villainy and Their Culpability, I ran across war records, military documents. And one of the documents was a letter from the freedmen's brothers who were pleading to the federal government not to remove the troops from protecting them from the white supremacists in the South, the Confederacy.
So to bring it so during post-Civil War, we're living in the South, but we have the military there who's providing oversight as far as
to protect us from these pogroms and these the bloodletting from these white supremacists.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to tap into that. How it progressed to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the letter. Dear sir, we, the undersized freedmen, having learned that the federal troops are soon to be withdrawn from the Columbus, feel constrained and most respectfully and request in the name of the Lord to implore you to not leave us unprotected by the federal troops. We firmly believe that the Almighty God has ordained us freedom, but at the same time, we wish to inform you that the federal soldiers be withdrawn from us, we will be left in the most gloomy and helpless conditions. A number of freedmen have already been killed in this section of the country, and from expressions uttered by the prominent men in the community in civil life, we have every reason to fear that others will share the same fate. We think the commander here might be better to protect us. And we know that there are men that could do the job and protect us. We therefore most humbly and earnestly pray you, General, not to leave us to the tender mercy of our enemies unprotected. Signed by Harry Watkins, Abraham Smith, George Blunt, S.W. Love, Morgan Gale, and 120 other colored freedmen.
Wow.
Now, this was powerful because it read like a slow dirge, because how we perceive something will never match the way that people who possess it.
Yeah, the severity of it.
Yeah. So we can look back at this letter and say, man, these brothers was really under a terroristic threat, by these terrorists or these defectors,
So what year was the letter
This was
written?
1868. This is probably 2-3 years after we won the war. Well, the Union won.
Yeah, so I want to walk it back to 1865 because what we call the Reconstruction years started in that. A lot of the scholars say 1865 all the way to 1877. In Du Bois' book, Black Reconstruction, he was going from 1860, I want to say 1860 to 1880.
Yeah.
It's kind of in chronological order, just
Well, I think
documenting those years and those times and what was going on. But I think it's essential for us if we start with that 1865 with President Lincoln.
Yeah.
I think we're starting with that. I think one of the things that stood out to me in even researching it was that, like, I can't think of too many wars where there was like a now what after a person won. And I think, you know, one of the interesting things to me was after winning the war, there was a huge question mark. And then so many different things, and so many different things could have happened should, you know, had other plans or other ideas.
Well, what came with that was what we call the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
What came with that, with winning that Civil War, that 1865, was that 13th Amendment.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what, you know, during the commercialized Black History Month, when they say Lincoln freed the slaves,
Yeah.
even though they leave out us fighting on the side of the Union, which Du Bois, the way he described it, it was almost like a worker strike.
Yeah.
The blacks from the South that were going to fight for the Union, which actually us helping free ourselves to win that war, was a labor strike.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is the Emancipation Proclamation really is the gradual emancipation that was supposed to take place in the course of like 20 to 27 years. So it was a plan to slowly implement certain policies. When they assassinated Lincoln, then all that just went out.
So
out the
one of the questions to y'all is, and this is one of the questions a lot of the historians pose, is if Lincoln would have lived. He got assassinated. John Wilkes Booth assassinated him in the theater. So the decisions were being made, just from what you touched on, Rob, was that, hey, we got this Emancipation Proclamation. It's about 4 million free black folks. What are we gonna do with these Negroes?
Exactly.
What are we gonna do with these black folks?
I think Lincoln get you know, history. I mean, in general, history is kind on those who are taken before their time.
Yeah.
And we didn't get a chance to see his plan play out.
Or if we didn't even know if he really, he had some ideas.
From what I read, the things about his ideas that I read have been really kind of disappointing. Like Lincoln wanted to give give Confederate soldiers amnesty.
Yes.
So you pretty much, the only people who he wanted to, you know, have any prosecution towards were those generals and people who had engaged in torture of prisoners of war. And to the Confederate, he would welcome all those states back, and all he wanted was 10% of the state to pledge allegiance to
like
the
a
Union.
loyalty.
But this is the thing, man. The reason why these platforms are important, because we have to disabuse people on the notion of this side versus that side. Because when it all comes together, you see that these backroom deals were made.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And everybody was kind of playing for the same team because everybody benefited off the blood of us. You know what I'm saying?
It was
even
politics.
in that,
It was politics. It was money, and of course racism.
Exactly.
All
that
mixed
was the
together.
driver, though. The racism was the driver. And Lincoln always had concerns about us being free and being left to the wolves. That's why when we mentioned earlier, he tried to find ways to dispatch us to here and there.
Yeah, and now some black people will say, it's a question that we can pose to the people that's watching us, is that we got that 13th Amendment, then we got that 14th Amendment to declare us as citizens. And the 14th and 15th are kind of tied, and we'll back it up and get into the chronology of all of that with blacks being able to vote with that 15th Amendment. But one thing is, okay, you got the 14th Amendment, you're a citizen, but I was never asked if I wanted to be a citizen.
Man, that was a great observation you pointed out.
But the to unspool from the thinking around the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment, they had these miserable wanderers in their mind, drudging their life out through petty default. What are we going to do with them? We need them to be able to vote. We need them to be able to participate. They just can't be wanderers. So this is the garb of some type of status, or, you know, to give us, even though it was an underclass, you know, but they threw that on us. And that's why when you study Noble Drew Ali, he constantly says the 14th and 15th Amendment are not necessary for my people. You know, saying the same thing that you were saying.
Yeah.
That we didn't ask to,
We
you know,
didn't
that
ask
wasn't
them to come.
necessary.
It was like, hey, you're a citizen now.
Exactly.
And it worked. Of course, it always works in someone else's advantage, but just to keep the order. So now Lincoln is assassinated. Gotcha. We don't really know what his plan would have been. It's all theoretical. Now then, his vice president at the time that was running with him was Andrew Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
which ironically was a Democrat.
And
Lincoln was a Republican.
And let's put this out there. Andrew Johnson is the most racist president that ever existed.
He came in with.
Yeah.
He kind of played it as if he was the Southern guy from Tennessee
Yeah.
that
He was
supported the Union.
He was the Confederates' wet dream.
Yeah,
They were surprised at what they got from him after that.
Yeah,
Because they were supposed
Lincoln
to be
was
punished.
the first president to get assassinated. So now you have a situation in history where your VP becomes the president.
Yep.
And man, once he became the president, it was almost like the rebels in the Confederacy. It was almost like they won the
So
war.
go back. You got Sherman Field Orders 15. This is what we call reparations. Well, William Tecumseh Sherman talks to the freedmen and asks them what they want. We got a year left in this war. Boom, we're about to win this. What do you guys want? They lay out what they want. They said land is very important because if we don't have land, then we're just going to go back to being slaves. After they welched on the deal through Johnson, you will see how important land is, because once he gave the land back to the Confederacy, we went to sharecropping. We went back to a different form of slavery.
And even in that field order with the General Sherman, that was only the blacks that were following him.
Exactly.
That were with him going I want to say the islands or somewhere around Georgia at that time. And that was kind of like the first push of what we would call a reparations bill to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And just to, in context-wise and clarity too, some of the different land options that were presented were, one was from the radical Republicans, and this would be like the Thaddeus Stevens. His plan.
They came later.
His plan was actually to take the land from people in the South and divvy that land up to the free slaves, which it was an ambitious plan. It probably would have never happened.
Yeah.
But that was one of the options. Then there was the option that you brought up,
the Sherman.
One other thing I just want to point out, man, just for
the mule.
well, brother, I found no evidence. We have found no evidence
mule,
of the mule being a part of the 40 acres.
Yeah, it's a
bro.
little bit of a folklore with
Yeah.
the mule. I don't think
Just
they.
the saying,
Yeah, I don't
you
think
know.
they ever said 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
But it sounds good. 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah, mules would be there to. Of course, you
Help
need
till
that
the
for the
land,
land, but
yeah.
it wasn't like, okay, black people, you're gonna get 40 acres, and you all were
And a
entitled
mule,
to a mule.
It's like that kindergarten drill where you tell the secret and come back. We're
Yeah.
gonna get 40 acres.
Yeah.
We're gonna get 40 acres and a lot of mules will help. We're gonna get 40 acres and a mule.
But just to give people some context also with the politics, one, the economics. First, the economics of setting up what's going on up north. Up north is industrial. They're railroads, they're building bridges, it's industrial. What's going on? What's making the money down south? What's making money down south? It's the cotton, the tobacco, the
Exactly.
sugar, the sharecropping. So of course the South, their interest is, hey, we need these black folks working.
Yeah.
You start this 13th Amendment, now you taking away my workers.
Yeah.
So now I need money. So now you got this rift. And then the politics come in is this. Okay, now we say 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation, it frees us. Initially, we were only considered 3/5 of man.
Yeah.
So now the South is, okay, well, we'll count 5/5 of man.
Yeah.
Now our electoral votes in these states and these Confederate states, now we got more representation in the House.
In which there was a lot of political gain, even in the Sumlers and the Thaddeus Stevens, and just to be frank, the radical Republicans are what initially put the military in the South. Put that because when Andrew Johnson's plan was he just reinstalled everybody. But what happened was when they went to Congress, the radical Republicans wouldn't accept that. So that plan was countered, and then that's how we got to having the military there, and ultimately what presided over the South that allowed blacks to thrive during those mystic years. But there was a lot of political gain as well, and to be clear on the party system is kind of weird because like one thing I didn't know during that time, Republicans and Democrats ran on tickets together for bipartisanship. So
That balance.
it was so even though Lincoln was a Republican, his VP was a Southern Democrat.
Yeah, it was very strategic.
But I'm glad you said that, man, because when you get into the mystic years that W.E.B. Du Bois pointed out, and then you get Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, We Were 8 Years in Power. quoting Thomas Miller, the black congressman, pleading to the Constitutional Committee, saying that we made all of these strides in these years when black people were unfettered, untouched, that we were left alone to run government ourselves. Because one of the punishments came to the Confederacy was they weren't allowed to vote. The guys that fought against the treasonous people, they weren't allowed to vote for X amount of years. They wasn't allowed to do a lot of stuff. So we were able to make progress when the federal troops were there. When Andrew Johnson did what he did, it was this revanchism.
Yeah.
So you get Thomas Miller saying, I can't believe this. We had the penitentiaries balanced. We had progressive legislation. We had school for the deaf, dumb. We had schools, period. Public
black
school
people were
system.
adopting, taking in orphans, because
Exactly.
even during those, what we call those mystic years, just to keep it in context for people, something that we kind of skipped over it a little bit in the sequential order of it is the black codes and what was going on and the formation of the Klan down south.
Christian black codes, yeah.
Because now black people are free. Now we're talking about down south, they're free, but what did the white folks there do? The Confederates down, they say, okay, we don't have a black code. So now basically you're free, but they're saying you can't walk the street and talk too loud.
Yeah, you're
or
free,
you
but
can't
not free.
you can't
They always
you can't
found
go into
ways
church
to
without someone
reinstitute-
being there.
They always found ways to reinstitute what they wanted to do.
Yeah, so they had those black codes in place. And then the critical the riots in 1866 in New Orleans
New Orleans massacre.
that kicked off. And then now around that time, now you got the Klan coming.
Yeah.
So the Klan is in formation. Your boy that's in office, Andrew Johnson, he just kind of letting it play out everyone. So now you got all these veto powers going into play. Yeah. He's putting stuff in and out of the house, and those radical Republicans with Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner and those guys. So now it's like, so the Republicans have the representation in the House, they got representation in the Senate. So whatever he tries to do, now they want to veto. So now you got this power struggle. And then he was impeached, but then acquitted.
The tricky thing about impeachment is like impeachment doesn't mean removal from the job.
Yeah,
exactly.
Bill
So
Clinton
was
was
glad you
impeached,
said that.
He was still able to run it the way he was really appeasing to the Confederates.
He was from the South.
He was
represented
the
them.
Confederates' wet dream.
He represented.
It was a wet dream.
It was real clear what he stood for, and I think what we going down that timeline, even bringing up like the Ku Klux Klan and different things going on, in the mystic years, and you were naming some of the schools and stuff, different things like that. We were accomplishing some things. Just wanted us to run down a couple lists of some of the things that we had done. One being, which I mentioned, like the election of senators, congressmen. A full representation, much higher than the 13%. I don't know what
coming right out from slavery to being representatives in Congress, black people.
So it lets you know the resilience, and we have to disabuse the notion. The biggest thing about this particular show, in particular, that we have to disabuse our people that we were just slaves, dumb, and then boom. You couldn't have done and accomplished what we accomplished right after slavery.
Well, and also we had the founding of Fisk, the founding of Howard.
Yeah, the historically black colleges.
Yeah, and then we also had you had the exact number about how much money blacks. raised.
Black people were contributing money, at least over $700,000. That black people were coming out of pocket. But now we got to touch on when. So after Johnson is out of office, the next election, you have Grant coming into office. So now, with all of the terror and all the stuff that's going on, he pretty much won in the landslide. So now we're getting into around 1868. So now this is when the Freemen Bureau comes into place. So now that's kind of attaching us to what was going on with the formation of the colleges. So
that organization, give an overview too of the Freemen Bureau and what it was.
It was almost like a government support system. Okay, these black people, they're free. They don't have land. They don't have anywhere to go. They need some assistance. it was a little bit of a government.
Yeah.
I would compare it to government assistance at the time and protection.
I viewed it a little bit more like a credit union.
That was a part of it. That was a
the
piece
thing
of it
that
too.
we got in the Freemen's Bureau was they didn't give us land. They stripped us of that. Because one of the things that we don't understand is we got 15 million acres in land. I mean, nobody knows what happened to that. But you have to read this book called Buried in the Bitter Waters and how that was extracted from us. Because we were supposed to get reparations, and some people were starting to get it. But when Andrew Johnson did what he did, he just gave it back to them. And they gave us banks that they robbed.
So what Grant did was he set up these military militias in certain areas in those Confederate states to give us protection. It was like, okay, we
4
got
territories,
protection.
right?
But he divided it, 10 territories, he divided it up into like 5 different militias, military militias within the 10 territories. So now that's where you're getting that protection. You got that Freemen's Bureau. And yes, you're right. It was like a bank to a certain extent. It was helping with the formation of the schools. Because you got to think at that time, that's when black people were able to get educated. We're going to school. We had this thirst for knowledge. And then one thing I want to point out is, in that when we call it those mystic years, in our quest for self-determination, just as black people, we wanted to reunite with our families. So now you're free. So you're going out trying to find
looking for them.
who's your family, traveling different places.
You see, and that's why we have to disabuse the notion when we have our people Paul parroting white supremacist racist tropes, or we don't do this, we can't do this. We was doing all of this stuff.
But the stereotypes.
Even Robert Higgs, the economic historian, said that coming out of slavery, black people were largely illiterate. 50 years out of slavery, over 90% of us was literate. This is the most remarkable thing that ever happened in history. The most remarkable thing.
So now we got that bureau, and then they damn near went bankrupt. So they there around 1868, 1869, around 1872.
And Frederick Douglass went to help to try to revive.
Yeah, he was around.
But he wasn't skilled in banking.
They kind of
He
led
put
Freddie. Brother, we love brother Freddie Douglass, man, Frederick Douglass. But
they pulled the garbage. He just hired
He was trying to.
You gonna run finance?
But one thing I will say about I'm glad you brought him up, Freddie. I'm glad you brought up Frederick Douglass because. He was around during that time, kind of advising Abraham Lincoln when they were trying to figure out, just kind of go back, what are we going to do with these black folks? You know what Frederick Douglass said? Leave us alone. Because we've existed better when y'all have left us alone.
And that's the point of this whole entire show is to gear towards, you got to understand, when we're not messed with and not tampered with, we achieve so much. You know, when we're not having the rug pulled from under us. And we showed that at different epochs in time, like in those mystic years. And then you get to 1920, the high water mark of black home ownership. But you see what happened with that, with the pogroms on burning our stuff down. But we always had these things working against us because, like W.E.B. Du Bois stated, the thing that was worse to white supremacy was bad Negro government, but good Negro government. That's what they feel.
And one thing I do want to clear up, and I'm glad you brought that up too, is once again with the cunningness of how these people were moving on the political side. They were spreading a lot of propaganda about a lot of the blacks that were being elected. Because for people that say, well, how were the black folks getting in office? We were in population. Once we became that 15th Amendment was passed with the right to vote. In a lot of states, blacks outnumbered the whites.
Yeah,
exactly.
So we were going
in political.
We were exercising our
right to vote. Exercising the right to vote with some protection. Because initially, when people say, "Well, we die for the right to vote," there's some context behind dying for the right to vote. Or when they say voter suppression. Now, when we say voter suppression, it's a lot different. They didn't have that word back then, but imagine you trying to go vote and they got a cannon somewhere. Someone's sitting there and it's like it's a life. It's literally a life
they had
or
militias
death situation.
rolling
to go vote.
around to come kill you or getting you to switch parties. I mean, that's why I keep saying that how we perceive it would never match the people that felt it. and we can sit back and look at it. But can you imagine living under such terror?
Way different time. But to your point too, because I think I want us to really drive that point as well, because I feel like the voting is really an issue that has been really just misused to paint and cast people's political views as some type of rank in their blackness or their loyalty to our story. And the reality is, and when people like a Dr. Claude come out and encourage, whether we should vote, not vote, who we should be loyal to, should we be in the middle? I think that all those sides, we should never discourage somebody or try to make someone seem like they're foolish by saying some people died for the right to vote, because people died for the right to vote for black people. People didn't die for the right to vote for Abraham Lincoln.
And we also died for looking at white women.
We died for that.
They would turn up on us at
but just
anything.
to give that context, when people say die for voting, that's right. We were electing ourselves. We were dying for the right to elect ourselves.
That's important.
And black people were majority Republicans around that time, because the Republicans were up north.
And their loyalty to Lincoln too.
And then you had some, it was frictions even with the white folks, because you had white people that were leaving the north and going down south for economic reasons, and I think they were calling them the carpetbaggers. And then you had the Southerners that were white Southerners voting Republican, and they would call them scallywags. And we still say that now. For whatever reason, I don't have all of the context for how it got switched.
But that's interesting you say that some of the whites came to the South for the opportunity, because even when we were boxed out and segregated in Jim Crow, because really Jim Crow was, our rail against Jim Crow with the Civil Rights Movement was a deregulatory argument. We wanted a freer market. Because they always talked about a free market, but we were always circumscribed into these little things. So the whites up north knew that, and they would come down to take advantage of these underserved markets with black people. Yeah, and they saw that.
And then we were a large population of people. We were reproducing, and one of the good things within this Reconstruction era, because there was a lot of, you can weigh it on the scales of the good and the bad, but the structure of the family after us being freed with that 13th Amendment, there was a conscious effort to restore the black family, black woman, black man together. The economic side of it is that, okay, initially I'm working on a plantation, right? I have master or whoever, the plantation owner. Now I'm free. Okay, Rob, you free. You like, okay. So now they saying to work this plantation, oh, okay, you want a job? All right, you got to rent the tools.
Yeah, exactly. You see, all these little mechanisms.
So you free, you need work, but okay, you want to get paid for sharecropping? I determine how much you're going to get paid. And now you don't have any tools, or you need my tools, I'm going to take that out of your pay.
But during the mystic years, though, and when we were thriving, like, what were some of the careers that those blacks who did? Like, because I saw they were showing one of the congressmen in D.C. showing where he lived. Man, this was a fly like, even back then it was fly. Like, it was like today that's probably like a $10 million piece of property. So like, what were some of the areas that we were working in where we were able to come up with, like, have $700,000 to put in education?
Well, some of those congressmen around that time too, they were lawyers, even though they probably couldn't get jobs around the time. They were getting educated. We were getting educated. Teachers and then ministers. We're a big population of ministers. One thing about it is some of those ministers kind of became politicians because of their speaking ability.
Exactly.
And the politics back then, it was speaking.
Well, now, that's one thing we did well, because they allowed us to preach.
Now we could do that. Now, some of the northern Negroes already had some money. So when they were getting into politics around over in that D.C. area, in that region, they were kind of coming for money. Some of those were the mulatto type, mixed, and they may have even, it's reported that some of them even had slaves of their own.
Oh, wow. Well, one thing I want to touch on too, though, is even though it only lasted like for 8 years, at least from my research, I feel like it's a strong chance we may have not got those 8 years if it wasn't for a radical faction of Republicans that were willing to, combat a lot of the legislation that was put in place. Now, to be fair, I'm not going to, say that we need to offer,
wasn't a savior
Thaddeus
type.
and them sainthood
Yeah.
or nothing like that, because one of the interesting things, and there's such a conflicted history. There's a lot of times when we deal with, because I'm a firm believer that like black liberation happened and we fought our fault and we did our heavy lifting, but it did happen with some assistance from Caucasians, So
But you gotta highlight that because this is not going to work without a percentage of them helping. Because if you go back to history,
Harriet Tubman doesn't free as many people without some assistance. So that's always been there.
Exactly.
So I would encourage people,
but we
looking
don't
at that time and looking at the radical, what they call, because even within the Republicans, they had to be radical.
Yeah, and they had to really stand on some things, and even one of the issues with black people joining the Union, and a lot of things that like I said, history has been very kind to Abraham Lincoln, because at the start of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln the cause was the Union. The Union was fighting the Confederates seceding. It was the radical Republicans and like Thaddeus Steve who encouraged it to be about the Union and emancipation. And then but early on, this idea that it was just they were fighting to free the slaves.
That wasn't Abraham's intent.
No,
that wasn't his initial intent.
And one crazy thing about it is, early in the Civil War, if a black person escaped from the South and ran to the Union, they would turn you around. Like you couldn't just go and the biggest deterrent, to allowing black people to join the military and fight, it wasn't about military training or numbers or anything like that. It was about the fact that what if a black person had to give an order to a white person? That was the biggest concern, stopping us from being in Union. And we were brought into the Union because of need. We weren't brought into the Union because of a moral.
Oh, they were getting drove. They had to go to Frederick Douglass to get hundreds of thousands of brothers, because they would have lost it without us. We win every war for them. But the interesting thing is we never talk about the brothers that fought on the side of the Confederacy.
Oh man,
what was offered up to them? They were offered certain amenities, to help fight, because it was brothers that fought in for the Confederacy, and they was offered up some of the same things that they offered in the Union, like land, certain freedom, just for not freedom for everybody, but for you guys.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna be honest, man. I never even thought about that, man. I'm like, we try to
think
what happened with that was there were whites that didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to fight for the Confederates. So there were white people saying, "No, I don't want to go to war. I'm good."
So you would have to think, what would make a brother that's enslaved fight for the Confederacy? You had to be a real good deal.
You got brothers fighting now for things that you wonder.
And it's like sometimes that's all they know. Like the way that historically the slaves used to mourn when a tragedy happened to Master's family. I was reading a book about the Master's son had passed away, and it was like real mourning. I think we naturally have a compassionate spirit, and I think sometimes when we're uneducated, that's all you know.
If you didn't.
And these people really feel for these people because it's all they knew.
And then it's kind of like, I guess, I'm sure that there was probably some Stockholm syndrome going on in slavery.
Definitely.
This person feeds you, this person, it's kind of like it's probably, to me, slavery reminds me a lot of like a real perverse version of some type of like pimping, where it's like, hey, you're the person who beats somebody, but you're also the person who feeds them.
It is. That's
and I also look at it like having, because a lot of people that fought to preserve slavery didn't own slaves. But slavery was like an aspiration, like owning a house one day. One day I'll get a house. So they fought for the aspiration of one day maybe owning slaves.
And just to keep the context going, now that we talked about the Klan and their formation around 1866. Now by 1870, with Grant being in office, so now you got these militias to shut down the Klan. Right. So now, and this is just, when you read it and you start putting two and two together and adding your own thoughts, you say, okay, now we consider things a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
The Klan was a terrorist organization
The
on the United
original,
States
the
land.
biggest-
It was a
Killed 3,000
terrorist
people the first
organization.
year.
The first year.
First year, if there was a terrorist organization, right? I mean, 9/11 didn't kill 3,000 people. You know, so
And so now they're kind of, let's say they're defunct around the 1870s.
Yeah.
Now, what really drove people from changing, from supporting the North and the Republicans, once again, we go back to the economics. We said politics, racism, economics. So in 1873, what happens? There's what they call a panic or a depression.
Yeah, okay.
So now the whites down south are saying, yeah, see, y'all voted for those Republicans up north.
Yeah.
They're killing the economy. The railroad, I can't think of the name, but the railroad company, they filed for bankruptcy. Now remember, it's industrial. That's what's driving the economy up north. So now the South is saying, see what's going on?
Yeah.
They're messing up the money.
Yeah.
Now the economics is playing a factor, and it's 1873.
Yeah.
So now we're having these changes. Then that builds up to that
compromise.
to the compromise of 1877, because you're going through those periods of time and looking, and now you got a closer election. Remember, the Grant election was damn near a landslide.
Yeah. I think when money is tight, you start looking at, and it shows really the fact that they pulled those troops back in that compromise. It really shows like the level of priority it is. You know, because when money is tight, you're not gonna cut food. You're not gonna cut this. You're gonna cut cable. And that's what we were.
Where black people got played. Black people got played initially. Remember, we were fighting on the side of the Union.
Yeah.
Okay, we kind of got played in that part. We were compromised to a certain extent, and then we got betrayed. Because the black people called it the Great Betrayal. The history books call it the compromise.
Yeah.
The black folks around that time were saying we got betrayed in 1877 with that election of Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes. And then they making that deal to say, okay, we'll give y'all the presidency, the Republicans. Y'all have to remove those federal troops.
And let us do our thing.
And then we do our thing. And now all those years of us being in office and everything that we're talking about, all those the mystic years, now it just crumbles, because now you got this Jim Crow era that's gonna come in, and now we got to deal with Jim Crow till the civil rights, 1950s.
But that's that revanchism that I'm talking about, because we're always getting backlash. We always got to look for the backlash, even with the Tea Party and Obama, then Trump and Obama. Anything they perceive as a win for us, you have to look for the backlash. We've always been this political ping pong. They always wanted to nibble around the edges without dealing with the issue. That's why it keeps coming back to hunt them.
One thing I want to ask you all, man, and it's, for me, it's been real disappointing as I reflect back to what was taught to me, as a kid in school and stuff. I'm like, why do I not know about there being the first black senator? But if you ask me right now, who was the 5th president, I could tell you. And like, I could literally, I'm like, why do I know who the 5th president was? Why were we singing these songs about that? But this, and not only, even worse is, not only did they not talk about it, when they did begin teaching about this era, it was presented as a terrible time in America where we were cheating our way into politics and all of that. And, what do you think about like just the way, or let me ask you this, why do you think it's not taught that in Black History Month, we don't even celebrate why would Hiram, why would we not celebrate the founding of Howard? Why wouldn't we celebrate
Pinchback and us being the blacks?
How can we have a Black History every month and
not really get delve into
for me to answer that question in short is because you can't depend on someone else to teach you your history. It has to start at home, and we have to make a concentrated effort to make it to where we have a thirst for it, so we don't overlook it. And in saying this and in talking about Reconstruction, because initially one thing we didn't say, that the word Reconstruction was really you trying to reconstruct the Union, and what was going on with during the Abraham Lincoln's time. But that's the once again, to promote our show, the importance of our Gentleman's History Hour.
Most definitely.
And we got an esteemed gentleman here right now. It's for us to have these conversations and dig and then look at that as a roadmap and say, okay, like you said, why were we not having that? So now a new generation will come up and they can ask those questions in class, and they can demand that, but they have to know the questions to ask.
But that's why I like this show, because it's a time capsule. Because we're not doing it for right now. We're doing it for someone to exhume this later on and delve into it. To answer your question, I'm working on an article. We talked the other day. And the article that I'm working on is about how white women are the fulcrum to white supremacy. They incubate it. They're the most important part of it. They're the most important part of it.
Yeah, one thing we didn't even tap on during that time was the women's suffrage. Because remember, the 15th Amendment only allowed black men to vote. White women and black women couldn't vote.
Yeah. And you ought to go check out some of the articles and some of the things that were said about black men from white women that started feminism and these different feminism factions, and how they viewed black men and some of the stuff that they were saying, that they still carry those sentiments now. That's why they jock for position, and they always get the things that are carved out for us, like affirmative action.
And also the economic side. There were poor whites that were sharecropping. They didn't even they could have unified with the black people. They were sharecropping.
Well, that was busted up.
But the propaganda that was
But that was busted up in Bacon's Rebellion, because Bacon's Rebellion split that, kind of split blacks and whites. So it didn't matter how poor they were; they just didn't want to be those niggas.
On the subject though of us taking ownership, because I am a proponent of, like, I believe that black history should be taken out of schools. I think we shouldn't even depend on public school to teach kids about it. I think black history should be something that we privately take ownership of.
Well, that is something that Carter G. Woodson did fight for. So I don't. It started as Negro History Week, and then it became.
I don't know. Black History Month is cool, but I don't feel like in school
you saying as a curriculum?
I'm saying educationally, we shouldn't really depend on.
I think Black history is American history, and American history is Black. I think Black, or what we call Moorish history, is world history. So you can't. If you're coming from that angle, we shouldn't have Black history because it's already a part of it. If you just taught the history, you can tell.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have it. I'm saying that depending on American educational system to teach kids in school, about the origin of black people, I think that part, I'm like, you could take it all out your textbook, because it's really it is so misleading. I feel like it does, in a lot of ways, it does more damage than good. If I had a child, I'd rather my son or my daughter to not even really to not learn anything about black history at school than to learn that we were we were
slaves and then we were free. But I would say this before we wrap it up. I want to shout out the teachers. There are some teachers that are out there working within the educational system to still spread the message.
I feel that. I can receive that.
There are some kind of the spook who sat by the door. There are some teachers that are working within the curriculum to still.
Hey, it wasn't no spooks. It wasn't no spooks at Bride Road. It wasn't no spooks at Lanier.
But I think that's the generations that's coming up.
Yeah. Well, let me ask y'all this too. Just we taking black history. We understand the importance of this. Where does this period rank on like the thing? Because we talk history. One thing about it, we talk this off air. Like, this isn't just a show that we come and let's talk. Like, we go out tonight. We were talking history. Yeah. But a lot of times the history conversations that we do have, even talking about blackness, we're gonna start with Martin, Malcolm, civil rights. We're gonna give civil rights all their time. Where does Reconstruction rank on the list of importance of things that we need to have conversations
when about? You parse out Reconstruction, it is vital to focus on it, because you're looking at a time where we were fresh out of slavery and we were able to accomplish certain things. To me, it's the kickoff. Even when you study the early 1920s and the height of the watermark of black ownership, you got to deal with Reconstruction because that's before the Harlem Renaissance. They're showing you different parts of time show you what we could do, and that's one of the most important things, coming from obscurity, going into running our own you know, and being self-ambitious and you know, having this motivation to be to uplift ourselves.
It showed a standard of self-determination.
Yes.
What should we tell our kids too? Like, because I'm always thinking about our babies and teaching them the truth. How should we explain Abraham Lincoln to a 10-year-old? Did he? Because I don't like the whole he freed the slaves. Well,
we need some revisionist history, and we need to approach
he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation.
I think Laurel Bidditt did it the best, and I think if we taught from that and kind of break down what he, you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We need to implement those type of things in, you know, our conversation.
Yeah, I think we have to never leave out our involvement in what was going on and what led to Abraham Lincoln having to do that. He didn't just wake up one morning and just say, "Oh, I feel good good today. I want to free black people." No, it didn't work like that.
History teller, he got brazy with his pen. Like, I'm doing this for the streets.
So I just want to encourage, just really encourage people to take a deep dive and look at it, because it'll really, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, it'll give you context for where we are today in this year that we call 2020. We're going all the way back to the 1800s. So we're saying 1800s and what was going on in a political arena. And you take that and you can compare it and you can really see some similarities to 2020. But it's not our job to give it all away. So, hey, fellas, do y'all have any other action item thoughts before we wrap?
I love building with you brothers, because what we're doing here is subverting the dominant way of thinking. And we're disabusing people of what our history really was, how resilient we were. And we can, through works like this, we can start to chip away and purge out the baby booming negative connotations about our people, because we were dope. We had remarkable times that we can always go to, but we're always getting the rug pulled from under us. We always have these exogenous things that happen that's outside of us that stop us from doing a lot of stuff, you know?
And hey, man, I'm just in gratitude, man. I really appreciate building with y'all. Appreciate being able to share this journey with you, and I always appreciate
you, brother.
You know, your presence, man.
Hey, before we wrap up, this is gonna go out a different day, but on this day, it's December 4th. Chairman,
Hampton.
My
brother man, Fred Hampton, man.
I thought y'all talking about Hov.
I think it marks 52 years.
There's gonna be some other podcasts that's gonna give him his flowers.
But Fred Hampton, our brother man, Fred Hampton, man. And I wore my man Dave Stunt sweater, community organizer, thinking about Fred Hampton. And the brother was 21 years old.
Yeah, man. Chairman 21. Fred Hampton. So, you know, we want to salute brother Fred Hampton, man. And, you know, that'll be a upcoming. Well, we touched on the Panthers, but just the deep dive on Reconstruction, we could pull so much out of it. Man, we could pull out the formation of the HBCUs.
Oh, man.
It's a lot that you can pull from it. But I encourage people to do the knowledge. If you just look at those years and look at all of the strides that black folks made in politics, and the rug was pulled from up under our feet, but
we
build
still
on
those
that
people.
and
We
build
still
on
those
top.
people. Yeah.
Hey, once again, this is Gentleman's History Hour. Shout out to all of the people that's doing the knowledge. Y'all keep coming with the comments. Let us know some episodes that y'all want us to talk about. Any prominent people in history that y'all think that we should talk about. Drop it in the comments, man. We appreciate y'all love and support, and please hit that subscribe button. This Gentleman's History Hour on EQ.
Rob J 10X.
And Freddie Jones.
Peace. If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.